Is it really possible to redefine your own narrative so that you can find your true north? The answer is yes, and I personally experienced it. Working with Toby Trevarthen and Rob McLoughlin, co-founders of the Narrative Playbook, I was able to redefine a new direction I wanted to take with my work and my life. Their groundbreaking work and research has helped individuals and companies reshape their corporate and personal stories so that they can realign themselves with their core mission. As always, a very special thanks to my patrons who make this podcast possible. If you enjoy listening, please subscribe and visit my website, barrykibrick.com, to become a patron or just to get in touch with me, for I appreciate hearing from you and will answer all your emails. Now get ready to add clarity, context, and confidence to your own life story. Gentlemen, this is a first for me. I want my audience to know I have never experienced something that I actually then had on my show. As you guys know, I most often have authors, I have musicians, I have filmmakers, but I was encouraged by a friend to take advantage of a program that you designed. I think program might not even be the right word, but it's a design that you created, and it's called the Narrative Playbook. And my guests are Toby Trevarthen and Rob McLoughlin. And I want to welcome you because you personally helped me literally become the new person I am. So welcome to the show.
Wow, what an intro, and I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, thank you so much. We're really excited to be here.
Well, not as much as I am to share you with my listeners. So let's get into what this Narrative Playbook is and how I found you guys. I was in the process of wanting to I don't want to say reinvent, that might be a little too powerful, but make an adjustment to what I was doing. And I was speaking with our mutual friend, Gary Zendersky, and he said, Barry, before you do anything, you need to meet Rob and Toby of the Narrative Playbook. And I said, sure, what the heck, I'll meet with you guys. You guys sent me a package, and I remember calling Toby and saying, this just doesn't interest me, Toby. It seems okay, but I don't see what it's going to do for me. And Toby said, let's bring Rob in here. And the two of you and I had a talk, and you said, just give it a shot and see what happens. Well, I want you to know that you literally changed my life. You put my direction on course, and I have never felt this confident about what I'm doing till I met you both, gentlemen. So, Toby, first off, thank you for insisting I try. And Rob, you can follow up with the magic that is made.
Rob, you want to go for it?
Sure. I mean, I think from our perspective, Barry, number one, it just heartens us so much to hear feedback like that, because that is one of the core reasons why Toby and I decided to develop the Narrative Playbook. We felt and continue to feel that there are so many individuals out there who would profoundly benefit from making this investment in themselves. And by doing this work that you've done and coming out the other side, we've seen now over 36 times with individuals, the clarity, the confidence that emerges from, again, making this investment in yourself. So it's really one of the true reasons why we launched this company, was to engender, hopefully, that type of response individuals. And so it makes us, exceptionally proud to kind of hear that feedback.
And Toby, your specialty also was dealing with corporations. So this is done not only for, actually both of you have been involved in it, but Toby, this is not just for individuals. You will do this for corporations. You will do it for management teams, marketing teams, sales teams. Everyone can benefit by the Narrative Playbook because it is designed to be a multidiscipline approach.
Yeah, exactly. This all came together back in 2014 when I was hired by a PR firm, of all things, to help them to overcome the impact of social media on earned media. And what was earned media? Journalists were fleeing. The content world was blowing up. Media companies were changing very quickly. And we leaned into this whole idea of narrative. And really, it was designed to help companies achieve alignment with themselves and who they were and how they were going to talk about themselves. And, I continue to do that work to today, all the way to today, I should say. In fact, I'm doing a lot of things right now in the future of work. And so I'm finding myself kind of at the intersection of people dealing with going back to work, the whole idea of hybrid work, what is work, where do I work, and then how do I show up once all this starts to unfold. And hence, the Narrative Playbook kind of was right in the middle of everything.
Well, you both turned me on to my last two guests, Peter Hinson and Jane McGonigal, who both specialize in the future of work. But what made this so good for me personally was I couldn't, it's sometimes hard to define yourself. You know what you're doing and it feels right, but I wasn't able to make that definitive statement. And I was starting to really look at myself as a writer. I wanted to begin writing. And in fact, when I went over my notes before we were going to talk, I literally took something out of my notes and put it right into the book I'm working on. And the reason is that you created a new way for me to see myself. And you say that that's why this is what you call a meta-level concept. It really is, it's more than just a story. The narrative goes really deep in one's soul and one's actions.
Yeah, I think, one of the things that we find, people, when they discover us, they come in thinking they're going to tweak their LinkedIn or maybe improve their bio or repaginate their resume, and they end up leaving completely transformed and going different directions or rethinking how they got to where they are. And it's really exciting to see how the narrative design that we've created pulls out a little bit of your history, really digs into your narrative equities that you have built over time, and you may not even be fully aware that you have those equities. So a lot of times we're able to kind of hold a mirror up and reflect back things that people, to your point, know they have somewhere in their background, or they might have bullet pointed things somewhere, but they haven't fully packaged it.
Oh, Rob, that happened so many times when I was talking with you, and you use the term, it ignites your intentions. And Rob, what would happen is Toby would say something to me, I would have something spark in my head, and then you would follow up with what that spark is and where does it lead me.
Well, thank you for that credit. But I think, it really is part of the magic in the process is the collaboration between Toby and myself as narrative practitioners, as we call ourselves through this process. And then, yourself as the individual that we are working with. And like any good relationship, there is a mix of active listening. There's a deep empathy for the individual and the situation that they find themselves in. And then there is Toby and myself leveraging our kind of earned strengths over our careers and certainly over our personal lives. And I think the uniqueness of our differences end up being a strength when we're in that sort of developmental or sort of program environment. And so when one of us is speaking, the other can be thinking and listening and in a very agile way, sort of helping to move all of us towards kind of the next discovery. And I think it is a little bit of the magic that we bring to that process. Just having that dynamic in the room, or in our case on Zoom.
And Barry, I think you found that this whole thing really is nonlinear in how it arrives.
Oh, to Toby, that's what I was just going to say. When we would be done with our session, and by the way, I should let people know you are directly involved in these sessions. I know, Toby, you like to say you viewed yourself as a bit of a chiropractor because you help people put themselves in alignment. But I really thought of it more of having my own personal massage therapist and my own personal therapist. You were able to, I would leave not feeling like I was in a quote unquote, a real therapy session where one would go with a psychologist. But I found myself very close to that. And like you said, when it wasn't linear, I would find that it wasn't until I was driving in my car that all of a sudden, oh my gosh, it pops into my head. Or I'd be lying in bed doing a little meditation and it was supposed to just be meditating. Well, I couldn't help it. The stuff would just creep in doing it. And it was a process. In fact, this is one of the things you say, you must enjoy the process. And it truly was an enjoyable process. It was liberating, and it felt as if you got me better than I got me.
You know, I think we can pinpoint that to the very terminology you brought to bear with us called betweenness, because effectively, as you know, in one of the modules of conversation, we really try to hone in on white space or what's not being said, or what's the swim lane you can own in the pool that you're in. And it dawned on us that you helped us to basically classify what we do in that particular module as a betweenness, because that's effectively what we're searching for.
I think it also stems from an area that we're sort of bringing in from our corporate work again. I mean, I think Toby's career as a leader and a strategist and my career in the consumer insights world, I think one of our strengths, and honestly, the reason why we found each other and bonded so quickly originally, was that we both looked beyond sort of the obvious answer and looked at a more holistic view. So if Toby was working with an advertising client who had a particular problem, he would go above and beyond to sort of solve the problem that they didn't even know that they yet were going to experience. You know, it was sort of sequentially next or sometime in the future. And when I do consumer insights and research studies, what's truly fascinating to me is to get a glimpse into the whole person, not just to sort of have them answer the question that's in front of them, because that yields a certain type of insight, but only by knowing a broader sense of the person can you really sort of solve the challenges. And I think we both bring that, or at least try to bring that, into this work so that we're anticipating steps ahead of where we are in the program. And I think that helps the non-linearity work.
And, you know, you see this because, Rob, as you would be talking to me, I would see Toby writing things down. I should let people know that the entire session is always recorded. You get a chance to review all the notes that you've taken. You share them with the person. It really gives you an opportunity. And I'm glad you mentioned Between Us, the book that I'm working on, because it gave me that opportunity to take that information, as I said earlier, and actually implement it directly into my work. Rarely do you see that direct connection, but what's kind of also so interesting is the indirect connections that develop out of it. So you get not only the growth in, let's say you're working with a company, you don't not only get them to improve their mechanism as a unit, you get to improve them as an individual. That's what I found so fascinating, was that it almost felt that, what was the Joseph Campbell, the hero's quest. You almost feel like you're on this quest with you guys, not knowing necessarily the destination, but knowing you're getting somewhere and that it's going to be fulfilling.
Yeah, and we really focus on trying to help individuals achieve what we call sort of discovery, ownership, and then expression. Discovery is the understanding of who you are and where you currently find yourself. Ownership really comes from knowing your value, understanding what we would call kind of your narrative worth. And then expression is what you sort of opened this conversation talking about, with the clarity and the confidence to kind of go out and venture forth in the world and share who you are and what makes you unique, and truly be able to have the language to articulate your unique dimensions. And I think if and when we achieve those with an individual, it's like a rocket taking off. You just see this incredible spirit of confidence come, and then we always get the emails and the texts and the feedback of how their narrative is sort of resonating out in the world, and we've been really blessed to have just positive experiences over and over again.
Yeah, I was going to add to Rob's point that one of the phenomenon that happens in this process is that individuals get to that aha place very differently. So some people click in immediately at the beginning and they're off and running, and other people, we have to go all the way to the end, and then they have a moment, and then we go back and do the chiropractor thing where it's like, okay, well, let's reconfigure things that were agreed to prior, because maybe they're out of alignment now. And it's amazing to me that ultimately we land it, but how we land it is messy.
Oh, you say messy, and one of the things is that the resistance. I was one of them, and it's overcoming that resistance. And first of all, you even have to identify the resistance first. So you guys, that's why I was saying, you literally had your work cut out with me.
It's fascinating because I use that similar terminology when I work with companies, right? And when you work with leaders in companies or product teams in companies, they generally grow up with the sense of problem statement. What problem are we solving? And I have to help them to rethink and reframe that. In the narrative world, we talk about resistance, not problem, because overcoming the resistance is how you unlock a narrative. In a product world, overcoming the problem is how you solve for that solution, if you will. Parallel, but a little bit of a nuance.
Now, Rob, explain then, what is narrative equity? Because that's something that was brought out in your guide. And let me give the listeners a chance one more time to just at least visit with you guys and see if this is good for them. It's simply www.thenarrativeplaybook.com, as it sounds, thenarrativeplaybook.com. But that equity is a word, we hear it a lot, but you use it in a unique way when it comes to drawing out the narration of one's life?
Yeah. So to kick off, when Toby and I launched this company back in 2020, we would have a series of sessions every single week to basically develop and evolve the theoretical aspect of what we were essentially solving for. And so we got to a place where we really discovered that what we were helping individuals identify and discover was their sense of narrative worth. And I think, each of us, and I'm sure your audience as well, has grown up living with this notion of self-worth, and certainly living with a notion of net worth on the financial side of the ledger. And we truly believe, and has been documented through the work that we've done with individuals, that there's this sort of invisible layer of narrative worth, which is supported by the narrative equities that you talk about. And when you have a sense of narrative worth, you really have a true definitive understanding of who you are and what your strengths are. And to Toby's point about how companies think of problems versus resistance, the equities that we have kind of identified that support or potentially detract from narrative worth are built, borrowed, spent, and shared. And built is essentially, what are your accomplishments? Just doing the work of cataloging the achievements that you've had. And I don't necessarily mean in terms of awards. I mean, when individuals get up and put in the work every single day in their career or in other areas of their life, we don't take time to kind of list those or capture those or collect those in a meaningful way. And so we sort of lose that notion of our accomplishments. From a borrow perspective, we have, or all of us have, some variation on companies that we've worked with, schools that we've gone to, things that we've achieved. And those are really a list of our associations, which are a different kind of equity, but equally important as you're trying to sort of clearly articulate yourself to the world. Both the built and the borrowed, in a corporate sense, kind of represent case studies, right? They're past looking achievements or associations that are yours, but they're not necessarily yours uniquely. And then when you connect it with the other two equities, which are spent and shared, and spent means, where are you spending your time? Where are you investing your energy? And then share is, how are you expressing yourself out in the world? Those represent kind of future leading areas that we call use cases. So when you pull this all together, as we do through the sessions of working with you, we're simultaneously looking at your past case studies, as well as helping you define your use cases. And those four equities and gaining clarity, if you will, in each of those boxes allows us collaboratively, and then you individually, to have a true sense of your narrative worth. Because I think you rarely take the time to document all of those areas. And that is kind of precisely what our program helps you set out to do, especially in the early stages. And by even having a documentation of those four areas, I think you have a stronger sense of both your narrative worth. And then I think it also increases your overall worth, because you know and can now access who you are, what you've done, what you're associated with, where you're focusing your time and efforts, and where you want to express yourself and really make a difference.
But Toby, let me ask you this, because as Rob just said, even when I understood those qualities, it was not easy to take them and see the value and put them into value. That's why it was great working off of the two of you, because as Rob just gave a sort of philosophical output, Toby, you'd come in and you'd say, Barry, here's how you put that equity into value.
Yeah, that's, I think, again, back to Rob's earlier points of, how we blend our respective skills. Because again, half of this is connecting the dots, or helping either the company or the individual to connect the dots that they may not see. Some of that is done by, visual illustration. Some of that's done by suggestive directions. One of the things that we really try not to be is prescriptive, because if you're prescriptive, it's like someone's coming to you looking for the silver bullet. And we've had a few of those people go through the program who came here looking for us to give them the answers. And that's not going to help you. You need to get your own answers. We just merely guide you to find them, because they're in there somewhere. They just have layers and layers of sediment on top of them. And our job's to break that off and help it, rise to the surface.
Well, let's then go look into this as deep as we can. And it is all about our identity. But, you even ask an underlying question that seems to be very important. One, and it goes like this: do you want to stand out, or do you want to fit in? And there's nothing wrong with either answer. There are people that want to fit in better with their corporate structure. There are others, maybe more creative types, that want to stand out. There are sometimes those that want to fit in but should stand out, and probably vice versa. Sometimes those that stand out and should just fit in. So when you designed this program, you had to take in all of those different ways that people feel about themselves. And it's not it's not the same for everyone. Everyone's narrative is so different and unique. It's much more in depth than as you would just have to decide what logo a brand should use, or what marketing strategy a company should use. This goes very deep into one's own story.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, as Rob and I were kind of prepping and thinking about this particular conversation, each narrative is bespoke to some extent, and you're like a fingerprint. You're unique, you're individual. This process enables you to come through. And really, we look for patterns. We look for things that, we may have seen other places. And there's kind of two hat tips here. One, John Hagel, give him a little hat tip on the idea of that question: do you want to stand out or fit in? Because it is not a yes or no answer. It is a depends answer. And there are appropriate places and times for you to do both. And then there was another book along the way that kind of influenced some of this thinking, called The Medici Effect. And both Rob and I, are somewhat polymath in what we cover in our corporate lives, because we touch a lot of different things, and there's a lot of different parallels that we can draw on. And when you've now gone through 36 people, you can see tendencies and patterns that you can pull into the individual like yourself that we worked with. And then ironically, you can pull in from some of the corporate things that we work with, because you see these similarities that may seem disparate to others, but we see them as dot connections, and we lean into those.
Well, and I think that's a really important point in terms of how we discovered what we need to bring into the process as well. Because, even just working with the first few individuals when we first launched, we realized that we really needed to remain agile and be actively involved and really be the champion of the transformation. And so, as Toby mentioned, we're kind of drawing from our qualitative and our quantitative skills. We really view the narrative playbook as sort of a remix. And as Toby mentioned, every single individual that we've worked with has obviously been very unique in their situation, their background, their perspective, their heritage. And so it really requires, and we're honored to kind of bring our full attention to the process, to understand that nuance and to shine a light on that, and to help the individual kind of see the power of their individuality. And if we achieve that through being active and being agile, and Barry, sometimes we call audibles and we scrap parts of the process because we know that there's there's something that we need to get to right away to kind of capture the spirit of that moment. I think that ability to kind of consider ourselves as not a book or an off-the-shelf solution, but really sort of an active partner in your transformation is what's helped us kind of grow as a company, but also I think help these individuals kind of land their narrative and feel comfortable with where they end up.
Well, the one thing you focus on in helping your clients is, and we've all heard the term of North Star, but that's the finding that within yourself, your own North Star, your own aspiration, and how, and you make sure that it's not just a little slogan, that it really has deep roots, because it has to endure so much change. And that's the thing that is so difficult, is to describe yourself's North Star, live by it. And when you do, just this morning, I want to state this, just this morning, I had a call to do something that I thought would benefit myself. Okay, I really did think so. And I, from experience, knew that I would enjoy it. But the truth was, when I sat there, and my son is very good at keeping me on my toes, and he didn't use the words, but I had to think of my North Star. And was I going to really get what I'm thinking I might get out of this, or would I almost be taking away from my true mission? And when I was done, even though I believe to some extent I could have gone either way, I chose not to go the original way. I chose to really think about my North Star, what my new mission is, what my purpose is, what have I done in the past when I've done these things, did they benefit me? And all those answers became clear. I made the decision not to go, but it was the right decision, and I'm comfortable with it because I had that guidance from the roots of my North Star.
That's really gratifying. I think that the true essence of it, and not to get metaphorical on it, but it's your compass, right? And when you have the ability to maybe define it, maybe understand it better, it weighs into your decision making, like what you just illustrated. And that's not something you can sit down and write that out. It just doesn't come out. It has to get manifested through some kind of guidance, I think. And to Rob's earlier points, I think that's one of the things that we've achieved with this narrative design that we've created, and the agility of being able to recognize that somebody may be stuck and they can't quite get this North Star out. So we may do a quick pivot and try a different exercise, and then it's amazing to see how things will unlock. Or maybe just a word, one word change could unlock something, I believe you saw that happen live.
Well, you say even the economy of words. That's part of the thing you end up with, and I'm happy to say this, is an economy of words, meaning you can speak to your different categories. We'll get into it a little later, what that might be, whether it's your audience, your boss, your viewers, your listeners, your people you're selling to, whoever it might be. You're able to quickly describe what it is you do.
Yeah, and I think there's kind of two pieces to that where we have tried to sort of actively build a support system for people who are going through our program. The first is in, you mentioned Joseph Campbell earlier, and we kind of leaned into that thinking a little bit as we visualized what our program would look like. And there is sort of an invisible arc to the process that we go through. And, of course, we said earlier that the outcomes are kind of nonlinear, but there is at least kind of a designed element that follows an arc that goes from sort of identification to a heightening of senses to an enhancement, that word economy, and then the distillation to sort of get it down to its purest essence, and then converting that into action. And I think what you were talking about with that conversation that you had earlier today, where you referenced your North Star and really made a course correction based on that, is based on the second piece that we really thought was a core component, and that's building the narrative habit. To go through this program is one thing, but to have it as a habit that you have developed as you kind of leave working with us and are kind of out on your own, I think without that habit and without that economy of words, you may, or a person may potentially stumble. But what you're kind of referencing is that your narrative is a constant companion in your day-to-day journey. And by building that habit, you're able to reference it and honestly share it instantly.
Yeah, and I can add a little bit on that, because literally this just happened, and Rob is aware of this. Several of the people, and maybe you do this as well, Barry, have printed out the framework, and they have it on their desk, or they have it taped to their computer screen or wherever, and they refer to it every day. And we've had several people cite that back to us. And we had one gentleman who went through this program, like you, had a little resistance. He said no. And then he came back and said, okay, I think I need this. And he ended up crafting this really articulate purpose statement that gave him the permission or the confidence to go seek companies who had similar language. And he identified with a company that had word for word that sentence in their mission statement. And he picked up the phone, called the CEO, and presto, 7 days later, he got hired, and he's now like one of the top 5 people in the company.
If you have access to the knowledge and the power to kind of draw upon it when needed, that's really important too. And I think that can make a big difference. So that knowledge is power, having that awareness, and then reminding yourself either to activate it and continue to work on it, or when you get to a place where you feel really comfortable and confident in the world, to focus more on expression than reflection.
Oh, that's an interesting decision, because, as you said, you have to feel comfortable with it. And Toby, I have to say that even I want to let people know that just because you've created this narrative, that doesn't mean that it won't change. And
Correct.
It can change quickly. It can change often. That doesn't mean, though, that you're changing necessarily your North Star, your actual inherent part of your existence, as the things that would lie between all the things that you might be juggling, where that essence is. But the narrative itself can change as you grow, as you experience different things. This is not set in stone. This is a living document. The narrative playbook is alive, and you have to be able to feel comfortable dipping back in. I know I had to make some changes. I should have shared them with you. I didn't, but I made them on my own. And but that's kind of what you encourage people to do.
Yeah, it's very amorphous and organic, like an amoeba on some level, you know. I think, again, going back to like an early John Hegel-ism is the difference between story and narrative. You know, story is very much a beginning, middle, and end. It's a one-way dialogue from me to you on what I want you to know about my story, where I think narrative is much more of a dialogue that's very open in nature, and it tends to have calls to action. And there's a two-way inner communication between the sender and the receiver of it. And it's constantly morphing. And I think in a post-COVID world, and you know, from Peter, we talked about, you know, the demarcation of BC and AC, before COVID and after COVID. I think narratives are playing out as a much more relevant way to think about how we have to communicate and influence others versus telling, which was a command and control hierarchy type of scenario. So I think even with this current demarcation and the acceleration of technology and always on and 24/7, and a term that Rob and I coined called infobesity, where there's just so much information that's coming at you, and you can have a point counterpoint on the same subject in the same medium, you know, 2 days apart. Who do you believe? You know, what's the source of truth? So to answer your question, yeah, I believe narrative is this very living, organic thing that continues to morph as you morph.
I mean, we like to say, Barry, that your narrative isn't set in stone until you are. I mean, when you think about it, so we launched the Narrative Playbook as a concept in February of 2020. And I think for most of us in the United States, COVID kind of became a reality the very next month. And so as we were beginning to work with individuals, the sands of their foundations were shifting under them, literally as we spoke to them, you know, in many cases. And so, as Toby alluded to, you know, the past few years have been rife with so much disruption and change, and this question of what is normal. Is there a new normal? Can we go back? You know, this feeling of uncertainty. And so, you know, very often we've had to work with people to kind of reshape, reskill, and help them reinvent to whatever degree they feel that they need. And that's hard enough in a constant environment, but it became even harder with all of the complexity and changing nature of COVID and how it was impacting, you know, careers and families. And so, you know, again, it just goes back to just us staying present and staying agile as we help this individual get to a place where they really feel, again, clear and confident about what they're trying to achieve.
Well, you know, I get from you, Toby, the weekly newsletter, I'll call it for lack of a better word. And again, let me just reiterate for my listeners, I am speaking with Toby Trevarthen and Rob McLoughlin of the Narrative Playbook. And again, I recommend you visit their site, at least even just to get what I'm about to talk about, their newsletter. and that's at www.thenarrativeplaybook.com. But the newsletter is, I didn't realize it because when I was going through it, I wasn't getting the newsletter. It was only afterwards. But while going through it, you base your newsletter on what you call now, new, and next. 3 N's. And these stories represent different things and how you need to think. And in my conversation with the futurist Jane McGonigal, which you guys, as I said, turned me on to, that's one of her things as she goes even 10 years out into the future. You still have to think about what's now, what's new, and what's the next thing that's coming. And your firm belief is that when you have this well-established narrative, that it can still be the most difficult part of what you have to do, but it at least gives you something to stand on as you look upon what to do now, what to do next, and what's new.
Yeah, and thank you for bringing that up. That phrase and that approach was born a couple of years back, working with companies, and basically it allowed a corporation and the executives within it to speak 3-dimensionally. Because, if you think about the sales side of the ledger, they're living in the now. They have to meet numbers, they got to sell stuff, so they're under constant tension and pressure to close things. And then you have the product people who are making the next gen of whatever it is, coming 3 months, maybe a year later in the roadmap. That's kind of an intention. And that's back to Rob's point with, use cases and case studies. Salespeople needed case studies to validate that it had been done. Business or product people, when they invent the future, they need use cases to begin to articulate how someone might use this product or this feature going forward. And then a CEO is out there talking about, I see a world in which we're going to solve world peace. We're going to solve a United Nation SDG, whatever number that would be. So you've got a corporation who needed to be able to speak in 3 dimensions at the same time. And that really paralleled over very nicely for the person, because you are who you are now at the moment in the present. And that includes a little bit of your past. So if you're going into this second S curve, as we call it, or your new S curve, you're still kind of living in your old S curve while you're formulating this new S curve like you were doing. And that's now. And then your intentions, like we're going to write a book. You could now talk about the idea that I'm writing a book and it's going to be out by the end of the year. That's your new. And then ultimately, as we got to the solution of next, I think it became self-evident for you that it was time to point your wisdom to the generations to come, and they could share in your knowledge. And who knows what that's going to manifest into, but that became a next. And every individual we go through, when they, hate to use this Silicon Valley term, but grok the idea behind now, new, next, it unleashes them.
Wait, what's grok?
Exactly. Then I have to explain what grok means. Get it. It's a slang for get it.
Ah, okay. So are you grok enough? Am I correct? No. I was just getting used to woke. Now I'm grokking woke. Okay.
There you go. You got to live in the buzzwords, right?
You do. Gentlemen, I must tell you, but before we go, I have to add one more thing, okay? And we are about to done, but I need to say this because I think this element is so important for many people, whether they're going to decide to work with you or not. And that is a thing that you emphasize, and it's called identify quick wins. Because we are so besieged by the negative. You can't, in today's world, and I don't want to say that, I guarantee you Socrates was dealing with the negative all the time. These aren't new things. We're human beings. Since the first one of us decided to stand straight, we've been having issues, especially with our backs. But besides that, it's important to identify the quick wins, because that's what gives you then the inspiration to go to the next day and the next day. I know even when I design exercise programs for people that I want to help, and the way I did it myself was start with almost nothing in resistance, very little weight. And same thing if you're going to do aerobic. It's a 1 minute run, not a 30-minute run. Then it's a 1 minute and 10-minute run. It's the quick wins that get you to that point where it becomes truly a joyous habit, and you can become enthused about it rather than feel it as a burden or something you must do. It becomes something you do with enthusiasm.
Yeah, I think it comes down to building momentum. I think any of us in the audience that are list makers, what's the best part of making a list? It's checking the box and seeing that it disappears, or being able to cross off that line in your to-do list. And I think we've learned and had it, kind of documented by the people that we work with, that this notion of helping them overcome resistance and build momentum is really the key factor to figuring out, how quickly success is going to come. Now, obviously, we can't control all of those particular outcomes, but we can help influence how individuals feel coming out of our program. And I remember the day Toby and I spent a good number of hours kind of brainstorming a series of, I think, close to like 100, just small, really, really almost tiny things that could be momentum drivers. And that would feel really good when they're finally off your list. There's your mental list, there's your to-do list. Both of them carry an existential weight. And taking that existential weight off by achieving those quick wins builds momentum. And as you start to build momentum, then you get acceleration and velocity. And, when you have velocity, that's when you can, go visit the moon. And it's like that's what you need.
Or Mars if you're into next.
Or Mars if you're into the next. That's the next.
Gentlemen, it was a pleasure talking with you both again. It makes me now know I need to make another revisit. But, I want to end with your words. And you stated so perfectly, like any behavioral change, the birth of a narrative takes time to evolve, but it is worth every minute of it. Thank you, Toby. Thank you, Rob, for joining me and for enlightening myself and my listeners today. It's a true honor and pleasure to have you here.
And same here for us. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Barry.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this podcast and want to hear more, please subscribe or become a patron of the show at barrykibrick.com to keep it going every week. Thank you.